Hey guys, Brett Weiss here. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to talk about 5 reasons the NES Omnibus is different than other similar books on the market. My first book came out in 2007 when retro game book publishing was still relatively a niche market, just a very small corner of the bookstore. But in the last few years, lots of video game books have been being published, including, just big, reference books on specific consoles. Now, the NES Omnibus Volume 1 will be out late this year, and it is currently on Kickstarter. And you're thinking, NES Omnibus, aren't there similar Nintendo books on the market or reference guides or whatever? Let's get to the 5 things that makes the NES Omnibus books and my Super Nintendo books different than similar books. Now, I'm not just going to sit here and tell you what makes them better, although maybe some of that'll be mixed in. I could just tell you, hey, my books are better. Well, that's not going to tell you anything. So I'm going to give you some factual information. And every author thinks their own books are better, so that wouldn't be telling you anything. I'm going to tell you 5 specific things that make the NES Omnibus books, my Super Nintendo books, different than other books on the market. Number 5, perspective. So I got my NES in 1987 when I was 20 years old. I didn't grow up playing the NES from when I was 5, but I was on board with the NES early on. And so I come at it from an angle, I'm 52 years old, and I come at the NES from an angle of having played Pong in 1975, on Atari Pong at my cousin's house. From being in the arcades in 75, with Gunfight and with Pong and all these electromechanical machines and pinball. I've got a long background with gaming, and I remember when my cousin got an Odyssey 2 and all my friends got Atari 2600 and televisions, and several friends had Odyssey 2. My 2 best friends had the Fairchild Channel F in 1976. So I got a ColecoVision for Christmas in 82. And so when the NES came out, at 85, and I first got mine in 87, holy cow, was I blown away by it. I'd been playing, all these older systems for years and years, much more primitive graphics, mostly single screen games and non-scrolling games and that kind of thing. Well, the NES opened up a whole new world of gaming for me when I was 20. That's much different than most other perspectives you're going to hear either on YouTube or through gaming books. Now, that doesn't necessarily make my perspective better. It just makes it different. And that's what I'm talking about today. 5 things that make my omnibus books different than other books on the market. So you get perspective from someone who had already lived through the golden age of gaming fully when the NES came out. And it was just such a stark contrast, the NES, from anything that had come before. Now, I love those old consoles, but the NES, like the Atari, ColecoVision, and everything, but the NES was so much different. I mean, playing Super Mario Brothers for the first time when I had been, playing much more primitive games for so long was just mind-boggling. And so I wrote a lot of memories, I had of playing the games in these books, and my perspective is different. So that's number 5. Number 4, the omnibus books are professionally written, professionally published, and professionally edited. I've bored you guys to death telling you how long I've been writing books and articles and everything and all that, so I'm not going to go into that too much. But I do want to say, just give shout out to Schiffer Publishing. They're an awesome publisher. You guys might have seen their pinball books that are amazing. My 100 Greatest book that looks beautiful. The SNES Omnibus books. Schiffer just does a great job with the design work and the images and everything. Just gorgeous books, and they are professionally edited. When I write the book, and I've gone over it a million times, I will submit them to Schiffer for their editors to look over. So they go over them with a fine-tooth comb as well. So you're not going to see, hardly any or none at all, grammatical errors, grammar mistakes or whatever, or misspellings or anything like that. So these are professionally written, professionally published, and just the really heavy-duty hardcover binding. These books are going to last forever. These are books you can pass down as heirlooms. And, I said I do have the NES Omnibus Volume 1 on Kickstarter, and I will sign it for you, so it's something you can keep as a collectible or just something to read again and again and again. And I have a limited edition version on there that's signed and numbered. There's only 100 of those. So these are professionally written, published, and edited. That is much different than a lot of the retro gaming books on the market today. And I'm not going to, again, I'm not just trying to brag about this. I'm just trying to tell you what's different, because I've been asked, hey, what is this? How are your books different than other books on the market? So that's what I'm doing today, telling you that. 5 reasons. Number 3, the omnibus books, every single game in the omnibus books is accompanied by 2, 3, or 4 quotes from vintage magazines. Magazines like GamePro and Electronic Gaming Monthly and several others. The reason I do this is so you'll get a variety of perspectives on each game. Not just my opinion, not just my contributing writers' opinions. Now, I did a write-up for each game, like just the standard, synopsis / write-up for each game. A lot of critiques in there. But you guys don't want just my opinion or just my contributing writer's opinion. Now, I also included opinions from people who were writing about these games back in the day. Just snippets, just blurbs, a paragraph or so. Like these magazines were documenting and chronicling the NES games when they were on the market, when they were new and in stores. And it's real interesting to read the perspectives on these professional writers that were writing about the NES when it was new, when these games were just coming out. So you get a wide variety of opinions about the NES. I also quote some really respected websites like the Video Game Critic. If you guys have never been to videogamecritic.com, check it out. Dave Mrozek, M-R-O-Z-E-K, Dave Mrozek. I guess kind of an interesting last name, but the Video Game Critic, as he's better known, just has some phenomenal work on his website. And I, just here and there, I'll quote him for different games when I think he has a particularly interesting perspective. And I just want to give you guys a wide variety of opinions, and not just my own, and not just my contributing writers. So you get a well-rounded look at each game. And and what's really interesting, after the great video game crash of 1983, the magazine industry crashed as well. So the first 3 years of the NES in the US, there was hardly any contemporary reviews about these games, like the early NES titles. One exception was a magazine. It was actually more of a newsletter called Computer Entertainer. Now that magazine, that newsletter, contained the only contemporary review of Super Mario Brothers. When Super Mario, at least written in the English language, when Super Mario Brothers was new in stores, Electronic Gaming Monthly was not, or Electronic Games Magazine, as a, those old magazines like Electronic Games Magazine, they were gone. Joystick was gone. Let's see, what else was being published back then? Just those early magazines, Electronic Fun with Computers and Games, those magazines were gone. They were canceled. And so when the NES came out, and Electronic Gaming Monthly hadn't come out yet, GamePro hadn't come out when the NES was new. So Computer Entertainer was the only source, pretty much, in the US and in English language for reviews of those early games. And I do quote that magazine a number of times in the NES Omnibus Volumes 1 and 2. And so you get a really interesting perspective there. As a matter of fact, the Super Mario Brothers review is legendary for being the only contemporary English language review. And so you're going to get a lot of cool stuff, a lot of supplemental, opinions about every game that's in these books. That's number 3. So number 2 sort of ties into number 3. You've got a lot of space for each game, so you get a lot of supplemental material. Every single game in the omnibus books, both the SNES omnibus books and the NES omnibus books, every game gets at least 1 page. So you get a lot better variety of photos, you get more screenshots, you get, for some of the games in the NES omnibus books, you get the backs of boxes, which is interesting because I have more room to work with. And when there's a particularly interesting box, like maybe the back has some interesting text or some extra screenshots or whatever, I'll scan the back of the box and put it in there just to mix it up. Now, I use box art for every game because I think the boxes look better than the cartridges. The cartridges, just page after page of looking at the cartridges, maybe gets a little redundant with all the gray, just so much gray border. And I do love the iconic NES cartridge. It's part of the fabric of America. But just looking at the cartridges over and over, it's nice, but I still prefer the box art because you get art all the way to the edges of the boxes just look better than the cartridges to me. So I did use box art. But I'm not going to give you guys a, 400 and something NES book without any cartridge art, with no cartridges. So for select games, I do include cartridges, for some of the more popular games, for some games where the cartridges look different. So every game gets at least one full page. Now, some of the bigger titles, like Super Mario Brothers, Metroid, I think Ghost and Goblins, yeah. Quite a few games, 30 plus games for each book, the NES Omnibus Volume 1 and 2. 30 plus games get, more than one page, 2 pages. Some game, like The Legend of Zelda, actually gets 3 pages. So you get a ton of room on each, for every game gets the full treatment. Every game gets a full page. The NES is such an iconic system, and I'm such a big fan of the NES. I wanted every game to be fully featured, to fully covered, plenty of art, plenty of text, lots of information. And so there you go. And plus, I've got a lot of nostalgic, vintage ads. So since every game gets at least one full page, I had plenty of room to include these really cool, colorful, nostalgic ads throughout the book. Not just at the beginning or the end of the book, but throughout. So a lot of the games have these really cool ads. Some of them even the foreign ads. So I wanted every page to look different. I didn't want each page to sort of look the same. I wanted every page of these books to kind of look different than each other. You get a lot of variety throughout. You get some consistency, like, just your basic write-up, your quotes, and your box art, but with the cartridge photos, with the ads, with, just different stories and everything, every page looks different than the next. All right, so that is number 2, every game getting at least one page. Let's get to number 1. Now, I've talked about this till I'm blue in the face. It is the nostalgic stories. The reason I've mentioned this so many times is because people love these stories. I love reading them. I love editing, and you guys love reading them and as well. And so it's just so much fun to and I've been asked before, why don't I publish fan perspectives on games? We're all fans. But the people that contribute stories to my book have all worked in the industry in some fashion. Programmers, developers, YouTubers, game store owners. For the NES Omnibus Volume 1 in particular, I've got stories from 8-Bit Eric, who's a fan of some strange games like Barbie and Little Mermaid. Yes, a grown man doesn't like these games, and he'll tell you that, and he'll joke about it. I'm a big Little Mermaid fan as well. Gamester81 talks about playing NES back in the day. The immortal John Hancock has some great stories of going with his family to, they lived in a really small town, so NES games were few and far between, but he would talk about going, with his family on a special night to rent NES games. It's just awesome. Some of your favorite YouTubers, some of your favorite programmers, it's just really cool to read about how they grew up playing these games, what it was like for them and their families, bonding with siblings, playing games all night, epic 2-player battles and all that kind of stuff, how games help people get through a particular difficult time in their life, that kind of stuff. Programmers like David Warhol, the legendary Intellivision programmer, he also worked on some games for the NES, and he gives you guys perspectives, just some anecdotes and about working on NES games, some behind-the-scenes stuff. Greg Seward, the former previews and reviews editor for Electronic Gaming Monthly, talks about stories, playing the NES back in the day. You just get a wide variety of information and history and opinions about games, about every game. So last but not least, and I've told you guys this a million times, Adam F. Goldberg, who wrote the forward to the NES Omnibus Volume 1. Big, awesome 1,200-page story forward. He talks about his friend who hogged the NES, so he would have to just sit and watch, about being jealous of his friend who had an NES, and then he finally got one, about wanting a Super Nintendo. So the NES books, my NES books, the NES Omnibus Volume 1, so much different than any other NES books on the market. And so just wanted to give you guys 5 reasons these books are much different than others, because I have been asked that many times. And when I'm asked the question again and again, I do like to give you guys the answers. And I do have the book on Kickstarter right now. I'm going to put a link in the description to the Kickstarter page. And you can back the book on Kickstarter for just $5. You can get your name in the NES Omnibus Volume 1. If you want the book, it's just $50. This is for a gorgeous, massive hardcover book with over 2,200 photos. It's just a massive, you know, really nicely designed hardcover book that's very professional. And you can grab that, you know, you can get on there and pre-order it today. There is a limited edition that's signed and numbered. I do sign all the books I send out if you want them signed, but this one is numbered, and there's just 100 of these, and I think we're down to about 30 something left, so you guys might want to get on that. All right, guys, thank you so much for watching the channel. Thank you for liking this video. Thank you for subscribing, and most of all, thank you for reading. I really appreciate it. We will talk to you guys later. Peace out.